Hello, hello, hello. This is Kiki the Goddess, and we are back with episode 2 of Thoughts of a Goddess podcast. This is the podcast where we dig deep with the intention to evolve into our best selves, the highest versions of ourselves. If you've already checked out episode 1, welcome back. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome and thank you all for being here. This episode, I want to talk about the different types of relationship dynamics and how to cultivate healthy relationships within those different dynamics. I just want to jump right into it. So there's 4 different relationship dynamics that come to mind. First is the familial, the relationships that we have with our family. Then there's the romantic relationships. Then we have our platonic relationships. And then we have the relationship with self. And the relationship with self is really the foundation of having healthy relationships in these other 3 dynamics. So, how do we rebuild the relationship with self? I think the biggest thing here is to understand your needs and your boundaries and figuring out what those are through the external relationships that we have and what we feel internally is right or wrong for us. And everyone's boundaries looks different, but I do want to take a moment to discuss the difference between a healthy boundary and a toxic boundary. Healthy boundaries should serve as a form of protection of our higher selves, where a toxic boundary is still protection, but it's protecting a part of ourselves that we don't necessarily always want to keep. It protects a more egoic self. In more technical or logical terms, toxic boundaries are created to deflect or avoid something, and that something is usually accountability to the things that we have done or the accountability of choosing to heal ourselves from the things that were done to us. And a lot of the times when we don't have healthy boundaries and layer that with toxic boundaries, we develop a communication style of avoidant attachment, which is really just a form of self sabotage, avoiding the healing process that needs to happen within yourself. Healthy boundaries, on the other hand, are the balancing of compassion without letting nobody fuck with you. Healthy boundaries are the true balance of love and logic, mental versus emotional, and in a way that favors your highest good. Healthy boundaries are the first step in cultivating a healthy relationship with yourself and then cultivating healthy relationships with those around you. And once you've mastered that skill of asserting boundaries, you can start to release the learned behaviors that you picked up in the external relationships. And when I say external relationships, I just mean those relationships that are outside of you. You start to release people pleasing. And once you release people pleasing, you become more aligned with your true self because You're speaking your truth. You aren't being held back by the feelings and the emotions of others. And that's why I say it's a balance of compassion too, because when you have healthy boundaries, we aren't just recklessly saying what's on our minds. Boundaries are about you. Boundaries are about the things you won't do and the things you won't accept. Boundaries are not about what another person is doing, is or isn't doing. If you have relationships with people, places, and things that don't honor your boundaries after you have clearly voiced them, then it's time to assess those relationships. Staying in these dynamics that don't respect your boundaries leads to so many negative emotions. It leads to resentment, anger, frustration, and rejection. Because you're now operating from a space that is outside of what you truly require. When you are establishing and setting your boundaries, you have to kill the idea of selflessness equaling being a good person. Because a lot of the times, selflessness to the point of detriment becomes self sacrificial. You get to a place where your cup is empty because you are pouring so much into external people, places, or things that are not pouring back into you. And when you start asserting these boundaries, you're going to have to get real comfortable with detaching. Because guess what? Everyone is not going to be aligned with those boundaries. And those people may come in all of these different relationship dynamics. It may come at your job. It may come with your romantic partner. It may come with your sister. It may come with your brother. It may come with your parents, your grandparents. It can come with your your close friend group, your friend group that you've been friends with for most of your life, but you're evolving into the next level of yourself, and that friend group isn't there yet. So what do? You change your boundaries? No. Your boundaries, remember, are protecting your higher self. So you're going to have to be okay with the outcome of setting your boundaries, no matter what the outcome is. You have to detach from what the outcome is. You don't set boundaries with the expectation of people following them. You set them with the expectation that protecting your boundaries protects you from people, places, and things that are not aligned with you. And once you become comfortable with detachment, you're going to have to become comfortable with solitude. Because, again, some things will be released from your life when you assert your boundaries. Because you gotta clear out the old to let in the new. You gotta clear out the stagnant energy to get into the flow state, right? You gotta release the relationships, the people, places, and things that no longer resonate with you, so that you can receive your tribe, your dream life, your divine counterpart, whatever it is that you're looking for at its greatest level. And being comfortable with solitude probably sounds like something that's really hard to do. And that's because it's not easy. It takes practice, but eventually you get comfortable. And there is so much value that comes out of that time alone. You create the space to develop the relationship with yourself, because there aren't factors that are turning you away from self, and you get to develop and establish a strong relationship with God, because your relationship with God is your relationship with the highest version of yourself. I personally love taking these bouts of solitude because it's the times where I evolve the most. It's the times where I learn more about myself and I come out of that solitude feeling more powerful, feeling more creative, feeling more me. When you're cultivating that healthy relationship with yourself and you're in those moments, that time of solitude, you get creative. You find ways to deal with being with just yourself. So it usually connects you to things that you had passions for before that you want to revisit. It leads you to trying new things and finding hidden talents. It leads you to you. You heal your inner child. You rediscover true aligned desires, and you discover your purpose, and you truly build self esteem. On my personal journey, during one of my most significant bouts of solitude, where I transformed so much, I did a 12-week detox and I healed in all four areas: mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. I got rid of some terrible gut problems. I had scalp psoriasis that I got rid of. I just became a stronger person mentally. I connected with my intuition and built my relationship with God and my spiritual gifts. I started learning more. I began studying to be an integrative wellness coach, teaching myself and teaching others how to build healthy practices for your mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional health. I released toxic relationships and I strengthened the relationships that were dear to me but just needed a little work. And I also started getting serious around the idea of this podcast. So I can't stress enough that having a healthy relationship with yourself is so important before we can begin to establish external healthy relationships. Now, the next relationship dynamic that I want to talk about is familial, because those are the dynamics that mold us when we're becoming who we are, before we know who we are, and the relationship dynamics that we come into without seeking. These are the relationships where we first experience the traumas that create our learned behaviors that we bring into our external relationships, our other external relationships, I should say. And there's different types of generational traumas. The first type I want to talk about is the type that's passed on genetically. So before you even know or meet your family and experience what's happening in the world in that dynamic, you come into this world out of your mother's womb with your ancestral trauma imprinted into your DNA. For example, if an expecting mother is experiencing something that is triggering her past traumas, or that is in fact a traumatic experience, the baby will have that trauma genetically imprinted into their DNA. So we are welcomed into this world with our generational traumas before we get to even experience the world. But on the flip side of that, imagine having a healthy and loving and fulfilling relationship with yourself and co creating with another human being who has that same relationship with self, and you've cultivated a healthy relationship dynamic with each other in an equal giving partnership versus the opposite. Imagine what we would imprint on our children then. The other generational trauma that I want to talk about is learned behavior. And this topic can be a little touchy because it takes some major looking inward and unlearning and relearning to truly address it. Address the fact that a lot of generational traumas as a Black person are stemmed from the conditioning that happened during slavery. And that is the act of removing the voices of the people who are in less control and have less power. And in the familial dynamic, those people who don't have control or rights are the children. Think of that term, stay in a child's place, when they become inquisitive, or when a child asks why something works a certain way, or why they have to do something, or why something is important, because they're in the early stages of developing who they are or developing how to think. We meet them with "'cause I said so." And those might sound minor, but we are impacting the voices and the self-esteems of children before they go out into the world that is going to do that even more. So those generational traumas can make or break a person's self-esteem. They can go out into the world being empowered by the people who raised them, or already with a low self-esteem because of their familial environments. And those examples, again, might not seem that harmful, but I know a lot of us can think of times that we remember that we can bring up to someone in our lives, usually in our family, and other relationship dynamics too, but usually in your family, or something that hurt your feelings and you brought it up to a parent or a grandparent or a sibling, and they don't even remember, but it affected you to the point where you still remember in your adulthood. And there may be traumas that attach to that affect how you move in the world today. Our familial relationships is when we first start to develop our attachment styles. And the different styles are avoidant attachment, anxious attachment, anxious avoidant attachment, and healthy attachment. And we all want to get to healthy attachment, but most of us are walking through life with one of the other three: avoiding closeness, avoiding intimacy, avoiding deep connections, or being anxious about losing connections due to abandonment wounds from our familial relationships, or having a combination of both. But again, we want to get to healthy relationships. And just reminding again that it starts with building that relationship with ourselves that we have to do because we came into the world with traumas. Though our traumas are not always our fault, it is our responsibility to heal from them. And we usually don't start to heal those traumas until the after we had experiences outside of our familiar relationships. So we take those learned behaviors into our romantic and our platonic relationships. And that might manifest as needing validation from external people. It will manifest as people pleasing. It will look like not connecting to your emotions for fear of being hurt or seeming soft. It can also look like a lack of accountability. It can look like lying. And all of these behaviors are trauma responses. A lot of the time, we don't realize that a lack of accountability or lying is a coping mechanism to feel like you're in control of a situation. And I want to add that just because you may have awareness around someone's coping mechanisms or their traumas or why they are acting out a certain way does not give a free pass for someone to be harmful or disrespectful to you in any kind of way. And it does not give you a free pass to do that to others. The only thing that we can ever change is ourselves. You can't change that man. You cannot change that woman. You cannot change that boss or that coworker. But you can get creative, assert boundaries, and remove the relationships that don't serve you. And there can be so many reasons why we choose not to release unhealthy relationship dynamics, like feeling lonely, or finances, or feelings of unworthiness for something better. A lot of times we say in certain relationship dynamics, romantic or platonic or even sometimes familial, because we don't feel worthy of something better. We don't feel worthy of our desires. And we don't feel this worthiness of our desires because of our traumas and conditioning. How many people accept an unfaithful romantic partnership because society has deemed it acceptable for men to cheat? How many times have people, male or female, stayed in unhealthy relationship dynamics because it was cost effective? There's always going to be a reason to decide to stay in relationships that don't serve us because change is hard, but change is also inevitable because when you're not changing, you're constantly having new experiences. So if you're not going along with the flow of life, and that's what I mean by when I say flow state, but when you're not going along with the way life is turning taking you, if you're not learning lessons and deciding something different, what's supposed to be growth becomes compounded in your internal body and manifests as stress and depression. So, despite the circumstances, we have to persevere and figure out a way. You got to let go of your pride. You got to let go of your ego. You got to be willing to, if finances are the reason, I feel like that's one that's easy to combat all the time. Maybe you got to go sleep on your parents' couch for a little bit. Like, if you are being disrespected in a workplace, maybe you got to take a pay cut and cut back on some of the luxuries in life for a short period of time to get yourself to the place that you want to be. Short term sacrifices for long term goals. In the grand scheme of things, you have to heal. You have to heal your relationship with yourself and have healthy relationship dynamics with others. I think there are 5 feelings that a healthy relationship should cultivate. And I think those feelings are inspiration, motivation, validation, reciprocation, and elevation. And I think all 5 need to be present for a fulfilling, healthy relationship. For me, if one is missing, the relationship got to cease. Especially the close relationships. So, in conclusion, I have 4 action steps to take to building a healthy relationship with yourself and in turn building healthier external relationships. So, the first is to establish and assert your boundaries and know that they are not an option. They do not change with relationship dynamics, they do not change with environment. Your boundaries protect the highest version of yourself and connect you to your desires. The second step is to show up as your authentic self. When you assert your boundaries, you build that self esteem to start to know who your true self is and show up as that person. And when you show up as that person, you begin to attract like minded people. And that's when that third step comes in. And the third step is to be engaging. Let the people that you now resonate with as your higher self know that y'all are a part of the same tribe. Let them know you feel seen and that you see them as well. And the last step is to never stop evolving. Continue to be teachable and learn all the different ways that you can become the best version of yourself for the greater good of you and for all those around you. And for even those who may see you from a distance. You will be really surprised by the people you inspire that you don't talk to on a daily basis or that you don't have deep connections with. That experience has been one of the best and most fulfilling and validating experiences in my journey of self-evolution and building this healthy relationship with me and those around me. So that concludes episode 2 of Thoughts of a Goddess podcast. Thank you again for listening and with me. I am so grateful, so happy, and so excited to continue this journey with you and see where it goes. Talk soon.